Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Ghora Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Ghora Bhakta Vrinda. Jai. So we're reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, the holy book, Adi Lila, chapter 12, text 36 and 37. And I haven't got the book with the script in it, so someone else is going to have to read the script. Is there one on the shelf? Oh, thank you. Yeah. Govindera Agyadila Inha Ajihoite Bolia Vishvase Etanajibe Asite Govindere Agyadila Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Najibe Asite Govindere Agyadila Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Nadive Asite Govinde Agyadila Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Nadive Asite Govindere Agyadila Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Nadive Asite. Ladies. Govindere Agyadila Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Inha Ajihaite Bolia Vishvase Eta Nadive Asite Govindere unto Govinda Agyadila ordered Inha to this place Aji today Haite from Bolia the Mayavadi Vishvase unto Kamala Kanta Vishvasa Eta here na do not dibe allow asite to come. So the Lord ordered, thank you. The Lord ordered Govinda, from today on, do not allow that Bolia, Kamala Kanta, Vishvasa to come here. Please repeat. The Lord ordered Govinda, from today on, do not allow that Bolia, Kamala Kanta, Vishvasa to come here. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Bolias or bowlers are one of 13 unauthorized sects that pass as followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord ordered Govinda, his personal assistant, not to allow Kamalakanta Vishwas to come in his presence because he had become a Baulia. Thus, although the Bolya Sampradaya, Aula Sampradaya, and Sahaja Sampradaya, as well as the Smartas, Jata Goshanis, Atipadis, Chudadharis, and Gauranganagaris, claim to belong to the disciplic succession of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord actually rejected them. So, Lord Chaitanya, as we know, is the incarnation for this age. So he's the authority. And actually he was very careful and very strict. He wanted everything to be according to the Vaishnava process. He wanted everything to be done according to Vedic principles. And he wanted everything to be done according to the authorities. So, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. And he rejected all these various bogus philosophies and mantras that came up. I remember there's one mantra, Nitai Gaur, Radhe Shyam, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, which is completely bogus because Nitai Gaur are not Radhe Shyam, it's Balaram. Nitai is Lord Balaram. So they give false ideas, and they're concoctions anyway. The mantras are concoctions. And therefore, they don't follow strictly Lord Chaitanya's instructions. So if somebody came with a play or a poem or some writings that they wanted Lord Chaitanya to read, because he was like, the supreme, and everybody wanted to pass their realizations, onto through him to see that, he approved. But Lord Chaitanya would have Swarup Damodar, who was very shastric brahmachari, go through them first. And if they equated with Vedic standards, then he would pass them on to Lord Chaitanya, otherwise, no. So there is an interesting story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about a devotee called Vallabhabhata, and that sort of shows this, gives an example of this. So Vallabhabhata was a very saintly devotee, and he was highly, highly philosophical and knowledgeable. So he had met Lord Chaitanya earlier, and then later he came to Puri, to Jagannath Puri. And he actually said to Lord Chaitanya that you're empowered to give love of God, and only Krishna can do that. So he was kind of indicating that Lord Chaitanya, he understood that Lord Chaitanya was Krishna. But then Lord Chaitanya says, well, I don't know what Krishna Bhakti is. And then he started this wonderful glorification of his devotees. And he said, first of all, he started with Advaita Acharya. My mind is purified by Advaita Acharya, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Lord Nityananda, who is always intoxicated with love of God, and he's also the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we have Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who is the best of devotees. And he teaches that devotional service is the essence of all mystic yoga. Then Ramananda Roy taught me about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he taught me about love of Krishna. And then he went through he talked for some time about the teachings of Ramananda Roy, and how Ramananda Roy's conclusion was that the gopis are the highest devotees, the highest lovers of Lord Krishna. And then he said that Swarup Damodar reiterates this. And then he listed about a dozen of his wonderful devotees, one after the other, to glorify them. So because Vallabhabhata was so proud of his learning, Lord Chaitanya was trying to teach him that you have to go through the Vaishnavas, you can't have this pride in your learning. So Vallabhabhata immediately, wanted to meet all these devotees, and when he actually met them, he was just struck with wonder, because they're so effulgent and so beautiful, and they're so sort of dripping with love for Lord Chaitanya and love for Krishna. So he could really feel that. He sensed that, because he was a very elevated soul. So And then he actually served all the devotees very nicely. He gave them prasadam, and he did it very nicely. He got the garlands and everything, got them garlands. And then when they actually, the day of Rath Yatra, when the seven, Lord Chaitanya, they created 7 different dancing parties, and he saw those devotees dancing in such love in front of Lord Jagannath and Subhadra and Balaram. He was struck with wonder. He just couldn't believe it. And then when Lord Chaitanya started dancing, he was just really blown away. So then later he came to Lord Chaitanya and he said, well, I've written this Srimad Bhagavatam commentary, and will you kindly hear it? And Lord Chaitanya said, oh, I don't understand Srimad Bhagavatam. I just chant Hare Krishna. So, because he knew that this commentary was of no use. So then daily, Vallabhabhata would go to Advaitacharya, and particularly Gadadhar Pandit, because Gadadhar Pandit was so soft, so he's try to go through him and have him hear his commentary, that nobody wanted to listen, because they knew that it wasn't strictly according to the authorities. So he became quite frustrated. And it's described in, Krishnadas Kaviraj describes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that he was like a duck among swans. So finally he just came to Lord Chaitanya and he said, and Lord Chaitanya was also trying, by giving him so many instructions, he was trying to get the message through, but Vallabhabhata couldn't hear it. No, so finally Vallabhabhata says, well, here's my commentary, and I've refuted Sridhar Swami. So I can't accept his explanation. So Lord Chaitanya says, one who does not accept the Swami, husband, as authority, I consider a prostitute. And he just cut down his false pride, and he just sort of couldn't believe it. So then that night he began to reflect, and he had a lot of realizations then that he was falsely proud, and he'd gone and rejected Sridhar Swami, who was always considered the authority on Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the next day he went to Lord Chaitanya and he surrendered. Please forgive my offenses, I'm a great fool. So Lord Chaitanya was the incarnation for the age, and therefore he cut down Vallabhabhata's pride, as Krishna did with Lord Indra. And he said to Vallabhabhata, no one will pay attention to you if you try to refute the authority of Sridhar Swami. Give up your false pride, chant Hare Krishna, you will eventually achieve Krishna. So he always endorses this Guru Sadhu Shastra. So these deviant sampradayas are called worthless because you're not going to get love of God from them. If someone goes to them and chants their made-up mantras and follows their process, they are not going to be able to get love of Krishna. So the next verse, going on to verse 37. When Kamalakanta Vishwas heard about this punishment by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was very much unhappy. But when Advaita Prabhu heard about it, he was greatly pleased. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshu strina priyaha. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. Bhagavad Gita 9:29. The Supreme Personality of Godhead being equal to everyone, no one can be his enemy, nor can anyone be his friend. Since everyone is a part or son of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord cannot partially regard someone as a friend and someone as an enemy. Thus, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu punished Kamalakanta Vishwas by no longer allowing him to come in his presence, although the punishment was actually very hard on him, Sri Advaita Prabhu, understanding the inner meaning of such punishment, was happy because he appreciated that the Lord had actually favored Kamalakanta Vishwas. Therefore, he was not at all unhappy. And then Srila Prabhupada says, devotees should always be happy with all the dealings of their master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee may be put into difficulty or opulence, but he should accept both as gifts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and jubilantly engage in the service of the Lord in all circumstances. It's a high bar. So, Advaitacharya was happy because he could see that the Lord had actually bestowed mercy on this devotee, Kamalakanta Vishwas. And he knew that if Kamalakanta Vishwas, it was all to do with this money that Advaitacharya had some debt, and this Kamalakanta Vishwas had gone to the king and said to the king, well, I know that Advaitacharya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he'd asked him, can you please excuse the debt? So it was kind of so incongruous to do that. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya was not happy. So it's just like Prabhupada sometimes says, what is this Daridra Narayan? You know, this phrase created by Mahatma Gandhi to say that all the poor people were Narayan. But Prabhupada said, what about the rich people? It's kind of, and why would you equate, just a poor person with Narayan? So anyway, for this reason, this whole incident took place. But Advaitacharya knew that he would be able to be corrected, and he was happy for it. So here in this purport, Prabhupada is telling us that whatever circumstances Krishna places us in, we should be happy with those dealings. And Krishna deals with everyone differently. So sometimes, in the supermarket, you hear people saying, why is this happening to me? Or sometimes you hear devotees saying, why is Krishna doing this to me? But Chaitanya Charan was saying the other day, well, we should ask, why shouldn't Krishna do this to me? Because, along with this body comes a tag from the Creator, Dukhalaya Ashashvatam. So the body is temporary and full of miseries. So that's Krishna's tag on our body. So why shouldn't there be reverses? So, and Prabhupada's here talking about that whatever Krishna gives us is a gift. And there is a nice saying that the present time, the present is a present. The present, whatever situation we're in, is a gift, and this is what Prabhupada's reiterating here. We should think of these as a gift. Opulence, difficulty or opulence, both as gifts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are some nice examples of this in the different portions of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Of course, Lord Chaitanya's devotees were such mixed, came from all sorts of castes and amounts of opulence, and you've got King Prataparudra and Raghunath Das Goswami they were like millionaires, billionaires, and then you've got others like Kolavecha Sridhar, who was so poor that his hut, the roof of his hut had holes in it, and the water would come in. And he just had iron pots for people to drink out of. But Lord Chaitanya loved him so much that when he was young, before he'd manifested his Godhead, he would go there to Kolavecha Sridhar. He used to get the bark of bananas and create these little pots out of the bark of bananas and sell them. And he was very honest. He always said the right price. He didn't inflate the prices. But Lord Chaitanya would go there every day and he would haggle with him and ask him for half price. And in the end, because Kolavecha loved Lord Chaitanya, because he was such a rascal, he would just say, okay, take the lower price. So the nice attribute of Kulavecha Sridhar was whatever he got in as an honest living, 50% he would give to Mother Ganga. Always. That's why he lived in such poverty, because he was so poor anyway, and he was giving 50% to Mother Ganga. But he was never unhappy. This is the thing. He jubilantly engaged, as Prabhupada's instructing us here, despite that poverty. And then later, when the Mahaprakash Lila, where Lord Chaitanya sat on the throne in Srivas Thakur's house and actually showed his Godhead to everybody, his manifested that that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So at that time, he was telling people various things that had come in their past and how he had actually orchestrated these, and the devotees were just ecstatic. And then he called for Kulavecha Sridhar, and Kulavecha Sridhar came, and the Lord offered him any opulence, but he would not take that, because he was happy in his simple life, just worshipping the Lord. So he was a very ecstatic devotee, despite that poverty. And then we have Maharaj Prataparudra. Well, also there are some sort of, I'll talk about that later, I guess, but Maharaj Prataparudra, he also accepted, just like Kulavecha accepted his life as a gift, he also accepted his life as a gift. But he had his kingdom, his capital city in Cuttack, but he would come to Puri and he knew all about Lord Chaitanya, and he so wanted to meet Lord Chaitanya. It was like all he could think about. And he became more and more sort of urgent about it. So then he actually wrote a letter to the devotees, because he knew he had to go through the devotees. So he wrote a letter to the devotees, and he said, if Lord Chaitanya won't meet me, I'm going to become a beggar. I'm going to give up my kingdom and I'm going to beg from door to door, which is unheard of for a king. So the devotees could tell that he's really desperate to meet the Lord. So Lord Chaitanya was like, I'm not meeting a king. And because of his sannyas, he was very strict. And in the end, they gave him some cloth of Lord Chaitanya's, which he worshipped every day. And then as things progressed, they sent his beautiful young son, and Lord Chaitanya embraced that son. That son became ecstatic. And then when the son went home and King Prataparudra embraced his son, he became ecstatic. So he was having all these interactions, but they were indirect. But of course, his mind was fixed to try to meet Lord Chaitanya. So Lord Chaitanya never derided that, give up your opulence or anything. No, he accepted he's the king. So it's not like if Krishna puts us in a certain situation, we just accept that. So whatever it is, a devotee accepts, this is my situation, this is the best thing for me, this is like my perfect situation. So this story goes on. It's a very wonderful story. When the Lord danced at Rath Yatra, and actually Lord Chaitanya, when they divided up the parties and they were dancing in front of the Rath, beside the Rath and at the back, Lord Chaitanya actually came. They had like really wonderful devotees like Haridas Thakur, Achyutananda, various devotees dancing in the middle of the Mridangas and the kartals and the kirtan. And Lord Chaitanya was dancing, and he actually danced in all 7 groups, but hardly anyone could see that. But Sarvabhauma got up on the roof with the king, and the king could see it. So Sarvabhauma knew, oh, he's definitely got the mercy. Because he had that vision to see Lord Chaitanya, and he was completely ecstatic. So later on, in the dancing, in order to protect Lord Chaitanya, at one stage the devotees made circles around him, and Maharaj Prataparudra and his associates made the 3rd circle around the Lord, and at one time the Lord fell down right in front of Maharaj Pratabuddha picked him up, and Lord Chaitanya said, oh no, he said something. He said, oh, I'm unfortunate, because the king had touched him. And the king was shocked, but Sri Damodar said, don't worry, he's actually pleased with you. And especially when Lord Chaitanya saw Maharaj Pratabuddha humbly sweeping the ground in front of the Rath cart. So as it happens later on, a few days later, after the Lakshmi Vijay, Lord Chaitanya was in the garden, and Maharaj Pratabuddha came to him. And he came just dressed very simply in a simple dhoti, sort of, no kingly regalia. And he came in and he immediately offered his obeisances, and he took permission from the devotees. And then he began to massage the Lord's lotus feet. And he began to recite some verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Rasa Lila. And Lord Chaitanya was so ecstatic. He was saying, go on, go on. He was just completely absorbed, and he embraced the king. There was no acknowledgement that this is the king, but of course he knew, but he embraced the king. So the Lord was so merciful to him, and King Pratabuddha was so happy. So in all circumstances, these devotees continued on ecstatically in their service with no regret that this is the situation I'm in. And for instance, Raghunath Das Goswami came from an immensely wealthy family, but he wanted to give that up, and Lord Chaitanya was encouraging him. Of course, he was a direct disciple, so he could make changes, and he actually instructed Raghunath Das Goswami not to eat opulently, not to dress opulently, not to live opulently, and always to chant and offer respects to the devotees. That's what he did. So, and there is actually another pastime where Lord Chaitanya indirectly he indirectly changed someone's status. And it's kind of an interesting story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that devotee is called Gopinath Patanayata. So Gopinath Patanayata is the brother of Ramananda Roy and Vaninath Roy, and his father Bhavananda Roy. They were all great devotees. And those 5 sons of his are said to be the 5 Pandavas. And they were always very dear to Lord Chaitanya. And as it happens, very dear to King Pratabuddha. So Gopinath Patanayata was the treasurer of the Lords, and he was given a certain area that he had to collect money, and he had to deposit that for the king. And at one stage, he deposited too little money, or it was actually little conch shells, 200,000 little conch shells, too short. Anyway, so the son of the king was upset about this, and he was trying to give Gopinath Patanayata a hard time about it. And in the end, there was some teasing. It's a long story. That Gopinath actually teased that prince a little bit, because the prince was trying to cheat him on his horses, which he was trying to give to make up for some of that money. He always said, I'll give that money back. But anyway, in the end, the prince raised him up on this thing called the kanga, which is a bunch of swords, and then you get thrown down on the swords and killed. So, he's a great devotee, this Gopinath. All his 5 brothers were wonderful devotees. So all of a sudden, all these people start rushing to Lord Chaitanya. Help! Gopinath Patanayata's going to be killed. You've got to do something. And Lord Chaitanya was like, why is this happening? He found out all the information. He says, well, like, if he's cheating the king, then, it's not my business. He shouldn't cheat the king. And one after the other, 4 different people came to Lord Chaitanya, they're going to kill him, you've got to do something. And the Lord, actually, what he did was, he just said, right, I'm going to leave Jagannath Puri and I'm going to go to a Lalanath because this is not my business. I'm a sannyasi. Why are people harassing me like this? But indirectly, that news went to King Prataparudra, the prince's father, and then he was like, no, Lord Chaitanya can't go. So he actually called this Gopinath and called him down and he forgave him his debt. Not only that, he said, you can go back to where you were, and he doubled his salary. So everybody knew in Puri, everyone knew that this was all the influence of Lord Chaitanya, that this had all happened. So in that case, Lord Chaitanya actually increased the wealth of his devotees. But then he chastised him and he told him, you can't use this money for sense gratification, any of it. You've got to use it for yajna. You know, you chant Hare Krishna, you do your devotion. And he was like, oh, I'll never spend any money of the king's again. And, you know, so it was a very nice story. And I just want to read the last little thing that, the end of the chapter of Krishnadas Kaviraj, his words. This is verse 149, I've simply described the chastisement of Gopinath Patanayaka and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's indifference, but the deep meaning of this behavior is very difficult to understand. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave so much to Gopinath Patanayaka without directly making requests of either Kashi Mishra or the king. The intentions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are so deep that one can understand them only if he has complete faith in service at the lotus feet of the Lord. And the last verse says, whether or not one understands it, if one hears of this incident concerning Gopinath Patanayaka's activities and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's causeless mercy upon him, certainly he will be promoted to the platform of ecstatic love for the Lord, and for him all dangers will be nullified. It's such a great benediction, you know, from this story, that even if you don't understand it, you gain the benefit from hearing about it. So, so then I was thinking about this always being jubilant. So how can we always be jubilant in the Lord's service? So the only way we can be jubilant, actually, is when we're on the platform of soul. Because as long as we're identifying with the body, we can't be jubilant because the weight of the bodily concept drags us down. So jubilance is there when we're on the platform of I am eternal servant of Krishna and Krishna is my eternal master. So in that case, when we're identifying in that way, we can have that because the nature of the soul, the nature of each of us, is to be ananda, full of bliss, eternality, knowledge and bliss. And that's intrinsic. That's our right to have that ananda. But it's the covering of the body and the layers and the modes and things that pull us away from that ananda. But Prabhupada is advising us here to be jubilant in all situations of our service to the Lord. So it's not beyond our capacity. You know, sometimes it feels like material world is just overwhelming, and you know, to be jubilant, you just feel like, well, that's it's a difficult thing. But when we're connecting with Krishna and as that tiny infinitesimal servant of our loving Lord, then it's possible to have this jubilation. Otherwise, unfortunately, the material modes cover us over, and you know, that bodily concept, it's so easy to sort of plop back into the bodily concept, and off goes the jubilation. Anyway, the more we can connect, the more that jubilation or ecstatic or ecstasy or happiness will come, bliss will come. It's our right, and it's the closer we get to Krishna, the more that gets revealed. So in the meantime, we can feel grateful to Guru and Krishna that even if we can't be on that platform of Ananda, we can feel extreme gratitude for being picked up out of the ocean of nescience and pulled out of that wheel of samsara, because once we take up this devotional service to Krishna, the wheel of samsara is, it's finished, albeit, it may take time. That depends on our application, but, that's our blessing. So that feeling of gratitude to Guru and gratitude to the Lord is a sort of the mainstay of our kind of positive life in Krishna consciousness. And as long as we use what we have, that verse in Nectar of Devotion, I think it's 1 to 255 or something in Nectar of Devotion, where Lord Srila Rupa Goswami talks about Nirvanda Krishna Sambandhe, that we utilize whatever we have in Krishna's service. And that way we have the best possible chance to connect with this Ananda, this bliss and this jubilation that Srila Prabhupada's talking about. Of course, sometimes you see it anyway in the temple, the devotees are running up and down and they feel jubilant. It's wonderful. So the more we can connect as that loving servant of Krishna, the more there will be that happiness. Okay, thank you very much. Please forgive me for anything I've said incorrectly. And does anybody have any comments or questions?
Well, at the moment, it's like being on the bodily platform. Yeah, it seems like that being driven regardless of what Krishna puts in front of us, sometimes seems a long way off. Can you give us any sort of hints?
Well, I'm covered completely. But it's just that connection, isn't it? Just remembering, even just thinking about Prabhupada's mercy on us, or, it's all like that rope that's connecting us with Krishna, even though we're so easily disconnected. It's like, it's just a flash, you can be really trying to absorb and then off you go. But yeah, I think, I don't know, but I think that if we can remember that mercy that we've been given somehow or another, and if you meditate on that, the magnitude of what's been given to us in our lives, and how, we would have been going on for trillions of lifetimes without any relief. And yeah, it's, I don't have any magic formulas, except try to remember that mercy as much as possible, because I'm always being sunk under myself.
With mission, I can remember a lecture Papa gave in the snow, and he was stuck with me for years and years, a long time ago. But he said, when things are going really well in our life, it's like Krishna's facing you, looking at you. When things go negative or distressful, then it's like Krishna's back, turning his back. Then Prabhupada went on and said, the devotee is happy, whether it's Krishna's back or Krishna's front, happy to see Krishna anyway. So that's a Krishna conscious way of seeing all these things, because Krishna's hands and everything.
Yeah. And, that there's all sorts of tests and trying times, but just kind of to keep that connection and keep on sort of, exactly doing what we've been given, then there's light always. Even if you get covered over, there's light comes, and hopefully the light will come for longer and more of it, and as we go on. And like it's the perfect process. There's nothing that can be sort of added. So it's just up to us to follow it, and as much as give as much depth in our hearts to our chanting as we possibly can, and to our interactions, and pray to Krishna help us.
Attempt to put words to this thought for you with what we were just looking at. I think I heard you say or read that whether it's opulence or poverty, to see it as a gift. Is that?
Yeah, that's what Prabhupada says in the purport.
I'm wondering if we can also use that, whether it's sadness as like a challenging thing that we've got in front of us, or a joyful thing that we've got in front of us, to see it as a gift from Krishna.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Tough times can help us go deeper in our Krishna's consciousness sometimes.
That's right.
And in easy times.
Yeah, exactly. It's the distressful times that actually, it's funny because everybody in the material world wants everything to be happy. But actually it's usually the opposite, but it's the opposite that we learn from usually. So yeah, sometimes it's a gift to have, troubles, and sometimes all sorts of things can pile up and be difficult. But if we keep consistently praying to Krishna and following the process, then that we get through that, and it's a wonderful thing to get through it and be able to look back and remember, by praying and by keeping Krishna in the front, then I got through that, and so that when the next one comes. That's right. Okay. Sorry?
Hare Krishna. So, thank you for your class. So, sometimes as devotees, when we're doing our service in ISKCON, we do relate to Kamalakanta Prabhu as a treasurer, because being in the treasury is always a very stressful situation. So sometimes you sort of feel for Kamalakanta, because he was just trying to, sort of even the balance of the ledger, so to speak, but he made the misfortune of, he had the misfortune of equating the ledger and, saying the treasure chose the supreme personality of Godhead, so it seemed that, like, okay, God is poverty stricken, but in one sense it was sort of like he still had that, his mentality was there, that he was a devotee in good standing, and all of a sudden Lord Chaitanya is calling him a bolya. And bolya devotee is like a vagrant devotee that doesn't settle down, has no substance, and has trouble following the regulative principles. So, the shock of it. So Lord Chaitanya was pretty severe there. I don't know if you want to make a comment on that. It seemed as if Lord Chaitanya was severe. Of course, he was severe. But...
Yeah, well, also Chota Haridas, seems like he was banished also. But when he actually committed suicide, and then he would sing for Lord Chaitanya became very pleased, because obviously there was some purification there. And so many times with Lord Chaitanya's associates, it's kind of like lessons for others. He's the Supreme Lord. He's come for this age, to teach us the holy name. But he taught so many things through his interactions with his associates. So, when things like that happen, and Lord Chaitanya seems to be a little strict, a little over strict or whatever, even Gopinath Patanyayaka, when he did that whole thing, he was like, I don't want to know about it, why is he taking the king's money? And, but he made it perfect. and made it something that we can all learn from. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really know what happened to him later on, but sometimes he was harsh. There's other instances also where he's banished devotees. Mukunda was going to hear the Mayavadis, yeah, and he got banished. But then he allowed him back in, and his heart's always kind, but all those different pastimes, they're all learning events for us. So I think we just have to try our best to do what Lord Chaitanya wanted, and to chant sincerely and go as deeply as we can, sadhana, and do our best in our interactions. And if we blow it, then we have to be humble. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai.